upcoming schedule for both 1430 and 790. Thanks to the local operatives at KFC in Fresno, Clovis, Selma, and Kerman, and thanks to everybody at Lee's Air Plumbing, Heating, and Roofing. One more time, the Lee's Air hotline, 559-320-1430. And along those lines, very apropos, on that line is our great friend, de facto co-host, the guy that I have good-naturedly been calling Bark Boy, and I'll do it again. It's Bark Boy himself, the king of the Bark Board. It is Sir Jackson Moore. Jackson, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Tony. How are you?
Jackson, I'm surviving. I got to tell you this, Paisan. This is how my life goes. I do this as a public service, just to let people know. If you think your life isn't going great, don't worry about it, because mine is always worse, okay? That's my way of making you feel better, Jackson. I go in for the procedure for the hip and the back on Friday. That's why I wasn't on the air. Okay, so it's a rough weekend, and I had play-by-play all weekend. Now, I have two studios, one for the play-by-play at home, and that's the one where I am upright or seated anyway. The other is where I am laying down, as is the case every day for the show. All right. Unbeknownst to me, my friend, my wife was nice enough through Amazon to order this heated brace that I can use on my back, my hip, or you can shorten it for your shoulder, for your elbow, for your knees. Wonderful equipment. But I didn't know that I'm getting this heated brace, and it is cordless, so it means it has to be charged. I don't know any of this. So after a rough weekend where I hadn't been in the studio, the laying down studio for the show, because I haven't been on the air with the show since Thursday, blinds are pulled or are down. It's dark outside, because we don't have sunshine. I stagger in, Jackson, the best I can. Walk in, and before I can turn on a light, and I noticed that there's a glowing, some sort of glowing, high definition green light staring at me. And do you know what the light said, Jackson?
What's that?
F-U is what it said. That's what it said. That's what I see walking. Okay. It's because the charging element, when it's full, decides a two-letter designation would be a good idea. So there I am staring at bright green letters saying F-U. That's my life. Anything at your end that tops that one as we get started?
I don't think so.
Okay. And I asked my wife, she goes, oh, yeah, that's what happens when it's full. I said, I know that now. So anyway, that's how it's going. I'm glad to be on the air with you. All right, I want to get started here, first of all, in all seriousness, with the fact that you guys still have the 50% off the board right now, right?
Yeah, so 50% off a year right now. It comes out to $5 a month. And a lot going on right now. I know the portal's not open, but it's basically portal season already with a lot of recruits, or a lot of players from other teams entering. Coach Ince shared today that the quote was, a few players have indicated that they probably won't be partaking in bowl practices or showing up to the bowl game. So they have some movement on Fresno State's roster here coming up soon. So a lot going on right now, even though it's a late bowl game this year, almost 20 days out from now.
Since you brought up the bowl game, it's understandable, and we've certainly gone round and round about this, Jackson, but if Fresno State is not in a high-profile bowl, which hasn't happened very often in all honesty, there is a tendency, and I do understand it because I was certainly one of the people that proffered this, that it was sort of a bridge to nowhere. You used to talk about it in the WAC all the time, right, when people would question playing Oklahoma and Tennessee and whatever, and one of the rejoinders was, well, you know what, you better do it during the regular season because otherwise the bowl games, by and large, if you remember the classic that was the Silicon Valley Classic up in San Jose and the muck there at Spartan Stadium, you weren't going to get a great bowl game more times than not, and we would say, it's kind of a waste of time. It came around to the reality that you have to treat it as though, it's one more game on national television, opportunity for players to play one more, particularly your seniors, and for your fan base to see it, and maybe some exposure across the country. Do you view it that way right now, Jackson, with this game? When you're going to Arizona, it's a very crowded day for football on that Saturday the 27th, and it is a less than preeminent bowl against a MAC school. How do you view it? Do you view it as, you know what, it's a game and a good opportunity, or is there a arm's length look you have about it as well?
Yeah, I think, at least in this situation, if you're Fresno State, you've got a stable coaching situation. You don't have, a bunch of NFL caliber guys that are going to sit this one out, I wouldn't think. And the transfer potential are probably guys that aren't going to be seeing a lot of playing time anyway. So this should be a pretty accurate representation of the 2025 Fresno State Bulldogs. It's a chance for them to get their 9th win. I know Coach Ince was pounding the drum during the fall once they hit bowl eligibility that they were looking forward to using the 15 practices for development and spending some extra time on the younger players. And fortunately for that effort, they are playing in a game that's December 27th and not this Saturday like the LA Bowl. You could have gotten a bowl game that would have basically given them no time to dedicate to those younger players. So I think it's all lined up very well for Fresno State. I understand there's a lot of teams that aren't in the same boat. They're going through coaching changes, or some teams maybe miss the playoff and they don't really care about bowl games, or in Notre Dame's case, refuse to play in one. So it's a little bit of a spectrum, I guess, on that front, and I think it lines up good for Fresno State. I think personally, even last year with all the chaos, I thought it was kind of fun to see a lot of other players get their chance to kind of make an impression in the bowl game and set the table for the upcoming spring. So I think as long as you approach it with the right attitude, there's positives that can come away from it. But I know there's going to be a handful of teams that are just limping in, and in this case, it's not going to be the Bulldogs or Miami of Ohio, so it should be a pretty competitive matchup.
Well, and I think it's very accurate to say, Jackson, it depends upon your point of view, and so much of that is what your expectation might have been. I mean, one of the reasons, and I know the Notre Dame thing is a cause celeb right now, and by the way, it should be mentioned, I think people are aware of it, that under the rules that will be put in place for next year, Notre Dame would automatically be in, because if they're in a top 12 designation in the final released college football playoff poll, they automatically get in. Had to do with this year. Unfortunate, but I understand why a Notre Dame, whether you like them or hate them, or if you're somewhere in between, why they're saying, you know what, we were supposed to go to the playoff, in our opinion. Therefore, any bowl game that we play, all we can do is fail. And that's the reason they're not going to play the bowl game. Yes, it's, a protest, but in reality, as you know, Jackson, they don't want to go out and lay an egg, right? They don't want to do it. They want to make sure that they leave the season as the aggrieved party, okay? But if you're a Fresno State, and like you said, you don't have transition, you're just trying to build forward, there's no reason to treat this with anything but an opportunity, right? I mean, that's what it is. And if you got a chance to play, and you got a chance to play on national TV, this one on CW, I think you certainly embrace it. Do you see any danger at all with this team coming out flat at all? I don't. Do you?
I don't. I think there's still probably some danger that it's going to be a legitimately difficult game. I believe the Bulldogs have opened up as about 3-point favorites, and you'd only have to look back to last year to see Miami of Ohio came into that same Arizona Bowl and just obliterated Colorado State. The MAC has won 3 of the last 4 against the Mountain West in this bowl game, so it's not a given, and I think there's some similar storylines here. I mean, neither team has had very consistent quarterback play. Miami of Ohio especially is down their quarterback that they intended to have, but there could be some similarities as well in the styles and the talent level. So, I mean, Fresno State needs to not only show up, but also beat a Miami team if they bring their game too.
Well, we know this. Anytime it's the MAC, it always, for those of us that were around at the time, always brings back memories of the California Bowl, because that was the matchup at the time, with the MAC always coming into play, whoever had won the Big West or what have you. So I think it'll be a competitive game, and it's just one more time in a sport where you don't play that many games. You and I have talked about this over and over again. No sport can touch football in regard to the meaning of each game, because you play such a paucity of games. I mean, that's why we see the National Football League being able to talk about a critical loss in mid-year, whereas, Jackson, in baseball, for instance, over 162, you can lose 10 in a row or win 10 in a row in the middle of the year, and it might not have any bearing at all on what happens ultimately to your season. In football, you don't play very many, particularly collegiately. So I hope the Bulldogs do get the requisite attention, and I also hope that it enhances the chance to bring people back. I mean, you look at guys that maybe did not get the reps you had hoped, and you try to get them in the game a little bit right now, Jackson, to let them know that you want them back. I mean, how do you handle this with the ease with which people can leave?
Yeah, I think it's probably still got to be performance-based, but those guys that you're probably talking about, they're going to get more reps. Coach Lynch was talking today in his online press conference that they're going to spend more time getting younger guys reps against the older guys, and they may see something that they want to actually see within the 60 minutes. So I think that's the case. I don't think it was an accident that Harold Duvall played more in the San Jose State game than we had seen for a couple of weeks. It feels like they shifted some things around in the wide receiver unit to try to get the three best guys on the field and maybe open some things up for him, make sure he's in a good place going into next year because they've earned his red shirt, and he's only gotten a few targets. So you got to make sure there's something for him next year, I would say, with talent to that level. So there's a lot of different things you got to take a little bit delicately along the way. But I think ultimately, assuming the usual suspects have all opted into this bowl game, I don't think we're going to see too many mix-ups. I don't think you can make a case, start Carson Conklin at quarterback and see what he can do and get an extra 4 quarters of film in there to make a decision going into the offseason. But I think the wheels are probably already turning on that situation for Fresno State to probably look elsewhere for a quarterback and give E.J. Warner his last 4 quarters and what they believe would be their best chance to win. So a lot of different avenues rolling with this bowl game and ways you can approach it, but I think the bulk of the tinkering happens during the practices, and then the game's going to be whatever they can do to win.
Well, again, 1:30 our time on the 27th. It is a very busy post-Christmas Saturday of college football. Game is on the CW, so you can check that one out, and we will go over, of course, the matchups for the rest of the conference during the week as we get to it. All right, I also wanted to, before we go to other matters, Jackson, address an email from our buddy Benito in Reedley. He said he gets the feeling that the ACC is going to be gone as a conference at some point in the near future. Now, Notre Dame, of course, is not Bavacqua not having kind words because the feeling at Notre Dame is that the conference itself proffered Miami over Notre Dame. The conference's rejoinder was no. We just stated the fact that Miami did beat Notre Dame. Where that goes, I don't know, but he was wondering if that does become even more unstable as a conference. Do teams like Cal maybe start to look to come back to the West Coast, or as you have said, they're going to hang on by their fingernails no matter what to a P4 designation? Where are you at with this thing?
Yeah, I think so. I think they'll be holding on as long as they can. Even if, let's say, the top 6 or so of the ACC got poached away and you had a bunch of leftovers that stuck together, I think they would probably prefer to be in that. I think it would just really have to be decimated to a point where the only way that they would exist is to steal the type of schools that they would need to join anyway in the Pac-12. I think that's about the tipping point that they might consider a move back west. But we'll see. Future with the playoff, maybe if autonomy looks a bit different, if the Power 2, so to speak, continues to separate itself, if there's as much leverage there for them to make all that traveling, to have that ACC logo. But I think it's kind of a last resort for them at this time.
Well, as we have talked, first of all, I think you're right. As we have talked, I think the reality is, and you're seeing it now exemplified by what is going on at a school like Texas Tech, where I think they're recruiting to the defensive line, and we've talked about this before. It's one of the more difficult places to recruit, except for the big-time halves. It's really tough to recruit to the defensive line. They were like 125th or whatever in recruiting to the D-line before this year, this offseason, where they suddenly were number 3 in recruiting, and that had to do with the one benefactor who has, as we've said, $4 billion burning a hole in his pocket. And all of a sudden, Texas Tech now has become a legitimate national power and a chance to win a national championship the way they're playing because of somebody's checkbook. Jackson, that leads to the same situation we talked about. Rather than being hung up with P4 or a group of 6 or whatever, as we have proffered, is it going to be that you're going to have to find conference mates that are willing to play voluntarily under the same financial parameters? Because otherwise, just one school in your conference, if they outspend everybody else big time, you can't compete with them. Is that more the issue than whether Cal or Stanford or somebody comes back? Rather, can you pair yourself up with a conference, no matter how big or small it might be, where everybody agrees to play and pay under the same parameters of both a minimum and a maximum amount, and accepting the fact that some other conferences may spend more and get greater talent, but at least within the confines of your own conference, you'll be competitive? Is that where we are headed ultimately?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they can ever get that in writing, but I think you could see it naturally occurring, and I think we're seeing it right now with the Pac-12 Mountain West type split. You're seeing a lot of these Pac-12 schools and what the conference will be next year with similar amounts of dollars and investments, and kind of a breakaway from them to most of the Mountain West. And I think I'm curious. You're seeing most of the SEC and a portion of the Big Ten and a couple other schools like Texas Tech are kind of in that unlimited financial range, it feels like. So could there be if there was a breakaway now, it feels more about the schools that can afford it than maybe prestige or history at this point, or geographics. But there's definitely a tier of schools that are playing with a ridiculous amount of money, and there's another tier of powerful schools, mostly probably in the Big 12 and the ACC, that are at another tier, and then you've got your Pac-12. So what I am curious if, without those infrastructures in place, is if we're talking quote-unquote group of 6, if someone can actually start excelling and be able to keep their coach and double down on the financial investment and really take off and have a Gonzaga type of football impact on the national landscape. Because we're seeing right now incredible kudos to Tulane and to James Madison for getting into the playoff, especially both of them. But I don't think those seasons that they had are anywhere near as spectacular as a lot of mid-majors have had, especially a lot of the Boise State seasons where they didn't get to play in any type of playoff. And now Tulane and James Madison are losing their coaches, and they're going to have to go through a lot of transition and rebuild through all this. So if there was a school that could parlay a couple of those big seasons in a row and convince their coach to stay and get that money going, it could make for a little bit of a different conversation than what's being had right now about those group of 5 champions.
Well, I'll tell you this. They better enjoy the fact that the group of 5, group of 6, ultimately, better enjoy the 2 in this year, because it's not going to happen again. The way they're structuring it next year, you're going to see 1, and basically that's all you're going to see outside of the power conferences. The other thing is, as we've discussed, the even more confusing part of this is that for the haves, this has actually leveled the playing field to a degree. And what I mean is, if you're already sitting like Michigan State was, where you haven't been hyper-competitive, but you are a have, now you get a $400 and some odd million endowment, Magic Johnson behind a lot of this, right? Indiana, it wasn't a coincidence that as Indiana beat Ohio State the other day, that they were playing John Mellencamp music on the outro, okay? Because John's one of the guys, as a native son of Indiana, that decided it was time for Indiana to start winning. So if you're in the have tier already, where you're getting TV monies that approximate everybody else, then you can get the benefactors. You've got a real chance to be competitive with the traditional powers like Ohio State, Michigan, etc. Jackson, in somewhere like the Big 12, for instance, when you have a lot of parity, but you don't have a ton of money, a school like Texas Tech suddenly showing up with $4 billion, how much does that completely skew skew the rest of the conference. It can also do something else in the conference that's close to that. But how much does that mess with a conference where not everybody is a have, in all honesty?
Yeah, it's significant. I've covered some recruits at that 5-star level where you see, maybe he's got a top 5 of schools that all look like your typical juggernauts, and then you find out that one school out of those 5 has offered a number that just the others aren't going to match. And
right.
We're seeing a lot of that from Texas Tech and Oregon, even against schools that are traditional juggernauts are not willing to put up the same amount of money or unable to for a particular recruit. So it's pretty wild to even see a tier list within the very top of college football. And again, curious to see at the kind of the Pac-12 level, Mountain West level, if there's a school, because it wouldn't take a whole lot to really shake up the variance and outspend another school, since we're talking about lesser dollars. So it's definitely something to watch if someone can really get some buy-in from their donors or their community to try to take off within this race here.
Well, we've talked, the 2030s are going to be a tumultuous time for college sport. And for those of us that loved college sports from the outset, for me back in the early 60s, when there was, I don't like to use the term purity, but certainly it wasn't play for pay. And if you were in college, it was nice to have people who also had to go to class with you. And at that time, and I'm talking about 60s, 70s, et cetera, and really up until very close to the present time before all this came down, you had that feeling that they were serving their apprenticeship, if you will, and if they went on to make a lot of money in sport, good for them, but you were kind of on the same level with them. Now, the distance that you have between yourself and other collegiate athletes, if you are a student, is kind of like what LeBron James said, if you remember, several years ago when he got into a rather tense discussion with the media when he was in Cleveland, and he finally turned to the media and said, okay, here's the deal. You go back to your life, I go back to mine. That was a true statement, as you know, but it also put further distance between the professional athlete and the general populace. Do you worry at all, Jackson, that we've now put a big-time chasm between the general populace and the student athlete?
Yes. I mean, I feel like what I'm noticing is just that some of these schools that have the big money, it just feels, maybe even within the team, is there as much of a camaraderie, or is it really just a football factory, with 80 of the best football players that they can get, all kind of looking out for themselves a little bit? I think a lot of schools have so far been able to manage it, but just kind of curious to see as it becomes more and more normalized here. Here's someone who becomes an 18, 19-year-old recruit down the line, as someone that's kind of just, that's the norm that they've lived in all their lives in a decade or so, how that's going to look. But I'm surprised we haven't seen more fallout. Teams that have a lot of money invested that start off slow, we haven't seen too many tailspins so far, but it feels like that's going to have a lot of influence with what happens on the field and off of it too.
Well, I still love collegiate sport, but I would be less than honest if not saying that it's become a struggle to understand the tremendous disparity now. And what bothers me so much, and this is, you and I have talked about this, about the micro and the macro. The macro is the overall health of college athletics, and that's obviously important. The micro is what's happening here in town. For so many years, and it really was still recently that I was talking about this, I continued to say and believe sincerely, just give Fresno State the schedule, which you get from conference, so people can't dodge you by refusing to come to play you at your place, which we have seen happen a lot with West Coast schools that are in the power conferences, that it would give you the schedule and you would get the same money conference-wise from television that they did, and then the advantages you had, a community that supports their programs, that makes it important to be here. Everybody wants to be loved. We used to talk about the UCLA softball team. They'd win national championships, but they did not even raise an eyebrow in L.A. Win one here, you got a parade and everything. That is a great draw for a student athlete. There's no doubt about it. So if you have the schedule and you have the money, the import, and the geography where you could get great athletes from SoCal and NorCal who wanted to be a little bit away from home for autonomy, but close enough to get back home in a big hurry, you have the perfect witch's brew here, if you will, in the Valley. Now, Jackson, all of that goes right out the window because if you don't have the requisite money, you can get all of that and still get obliterated by checkbooks that are larger in other places. That is what I'm struggling with. Do you struggle with that at all, or did you never have the delusion I had that it could happen to begin with?
Well, there was certainly a tier of schools you felt like if just Fresno State had that conference patch on its jersey and the TV money that was coming in, that they would pass a lot of those schools up in a hurry. I think maybe you can make the same argument for some, but the reality is until that happens, until they're given those opportunities, there's a big gulch between the money, even between the low ends of the Power Four and what the high ends of the Group of Five, Group of Six are able to raise right now and spend on NIL. I think probably more than anything, though, it's the combination of NIL and the portal because I recall Coach Hill making a comment about even before all this, Alabama's it's all first-round draft picks kind of a thing with recruiting. Right. Even before all the official NIL and money is exchanged hands here. But when you have the portal, it really it saves you from poor recruiting. If you whiff on guys, you can get them out and replace them with guys that are developed 2 or 3 years and just plug your holes. So there's not as much consequences to recruiting if you miss, and there's a lot more ability to make up for it. And I got to feel like that's got a lot to do with the parity we're seeing in the Mountain West as well. If you're at the top, it's tough to retain those players. If you're at the middle or the bottom, it's a lot easier to bring in players that are ready now, and it's not a 2 or 3 year rebuilding process. So it just feels like within your conference, the margins have gotten a lot smaller, and from outside of your conference to the juggernaut, it feels like the margin has gotten even wider.
Yeah, well, that is the reality, and that's why I think ultimately there's going to have to be some sort of association, if you will, where you agree to play as close to the same rules as possible. And, in auto racing, sometimes you'd have 4 or 5 different classes of automobile out racing at the same time, not in NASCAR, Indy, but in some of the Can-Am series or whatever. You had to be best in class. You know what I mean, Jackson? You have different races within the confines of the race because you had different horsepower for different particular classes of car out there. So you had to pick what was going on and say, okay, you might be in 15th, but you're first in your class, if you know what I mean. I'd hate that to be that convoluted in sport, but we may be headed to multiple tiers, many, many tiers, and they'll all be predicated upon the kind of money that you're willing to spend, able to spend, and agree with the rest of the folks in your conference about a minimum and a maximum. We'll see what happens. 2 things quickly. One, Benito said that, Bark Boy, that would be you, seems to laugh every time I discuss my back pain. No, Benito, you're wrong, because Jackson is not married to me, so he's not laughing about my pain. All right. Now, that having been, I'm going to pay for that one. You think pain, Jackson, be nothing like the pain I'm going to hear in a few minutes. All right. The verbal pain is going to be crushing in just a moment. I want to ask you quickly about the basketball team. Arkansas playing in an unfamiliar arena. They don't play that often in Little Rock, as opposed to being back in Fayetteville where they had just beaten Louisville the other night. The Bulldogs shot it abysmally, and Jake found out the hard way that everybody knows they need to take him out of the game. Did the Bulldogs learn anything at all other than they better shoot better than that if they're going to win?
Yes, but I don't think it was just the fact that they had a bad shooting night. I think if you're Jake, if you've got a 6'7" guard with an enormous wingspan, it's tough to even if you have room to shoot to get a clean one off. I think that's what they ran into. Zayon Collins as well, whether it was from the perimeter or driving, just those tall, long arms swatting shots away. Even when they weren't necessarily swatting the shots, it was kind of like going up against ghosts in the lane. Waiting for someone to come in and defend your shot there at the last minute. And missing some layups that he's usually making. So I don't foresee this reoccurring throughout the season. Maybe San Diego State or it might be a Mountain West team or two that's got some extreme length that I think you can now pencil in as being an issue for the Bulldogs, but not something they're going to see very often the rest of the way.
Well, you and I will talk more about it later in the week, but the final question for today. This is a break time for Fresno State after they go to Northridge coming up on Wednesday. They've got 10 days off, then to Vegas to open conference play, and then another 10 days off. Are you optimistic that when we roll into the first of the year that this team is going to be competitive as they get into the bulk of the conference schedule?
I think so. I think that probably the top of the Mountain West isn't as strong or as deep as it's been in most years. It feels like, in past years, the Bulldogs, maybe against the top 8 of the conference, it's been 2 or 3 years since the Bulldogs have gotten a win against that group, and now it feels like it's a little more like top 3 or top 4 that are probably going to be out of reach for the Bulldogs. And at the same time, they're quite a bit better. We don't know how good necessarily or how competitive they're going to be in the Mountain West, but it's very clear, net rankings-wise, they're from outside of the top 300 to inside the top 200, which is a pretty big jump. So the gap's not as wide. I think most nights the team's going to be competitive. There's probably a couple of teams, especially on the road, that it could get ugly, but I think most games on most nights you can anticipate the Bulldogs competing and hoping to get a win, and definitely a larger group of conference teams that they should be winnable games.
Well, we'll see what happens Wednesday and then particularly 10 days after that in Vegas as they start conference play. Jackson, I appreciate it. Again, remind people 50% off the board. How long will that last?
Yes, that's running through the month of December, so a lot of opportunity here to get in on all the pre-bowl scoop and the portal stuff and recruiting. Going to have a whole lot of intel about the Bulldogs recruiting class that have gathered over last week and a lot of interviews with the commit. So a little bit of a stall here for actual games, but a lot of stuff to cover on the site.
Well, look forward to it, and it's well worth the very nominal fee, and particularly with the discount. Jackson, I appreciate it, and one thing you can pass along to those on the board, because I've gotten emails about it, those that are not able to go to Saddleback on Saturday coming up to see Central East play for that Division I AA title against Pacifica of Oxnard. That game, 3:30 in the afternoon on Saturday, will be live on Spectrum Sportsnet, 691 on DirecTV. That's where the Lakers are at. So that game will be live, fully produced. And also, if you go to the Spectrum Sportsnet website, you should be able to find it there as well. Jackson, appreciate it, my friend. Thanks for jumping in today at the last moment. I will talk to you on Thursday. Take care.
All right, you too, Tony. Thank you.
All right, our de facto co-host, Jackson Moore, barkboard.com. Take a break, come back, tell you about the schedule, hand it off to Phil, his outstanding show Behind the Bench for 2 hours today, and then it's time for a very important Monday night football game, the Eagles and the Chargers from SoFi. Take a break, tell you about the schedule after this as the Bulldog Hour continues on Central Valley Sports Leader 1430 ESPN.
Steel prices are rising everywhere except where it counts. Pacific Steel Supply INC in Fresno still delivers unbeatable value, rain or shine. They'll match or beat any competitor's price by at least 10% on top quality steel, roofing, and components. 24/7 service? Absolutely. When storms hit, Pacific Steel Supply INC keeps your build moving. Get your free quote today at PacificSteelSupplyINC.com. Pacific Steel Supply INC. Premium products delivered on time, every time.
Mike Dermanuel Jr. of Hub International Insurance.
You've got to have a competitive benefits program to attract and retain employees. And as the cost of that continues to rise, we're becoming very innovative in how to finance those benefits for their employees.
Mike Dermanuel Jr. of Hub International. Learn more at hubinternational.com. License number 0757776.
If our clients succeed, we succeed.
At Helena Agri-Enterprises, we're committed to helping you make the best agronomic decisions for your farm. That's why we combine cutting-edge technology with superior product. Helena's agri-intelligence solutions use in-depth analysis to identify potential problems in the field before they take root. Combined with a complete line of high-quality crop production and crop protection inputs, Helena has the tools to help you increase productivity, enhance performance, and maximize your return on investment. Contact your local Helena representative or authorized dealer to create the right plan for your farm with Helena products and agri-intelligence solutions.
We started like you, a small team with a big dream to serve the Valley. 20 years later, FFB Bank is still proudly backing businesses across California and beyond. We've learned a lot about what it takes to grow, and now we're using that experience to make things easier for you. With our Switch and Save offer, we'll cover up to 90 days of payment processing, provide no-cost equipment, and offer competitive rates so your business can keep more of what it earns. And behind it all is a local team that truly understands your goals and is ready to help you reach them. Make the switch. Save with FFB. Visit ffb.bank to get started. Member FDIC, Equal Opportunity Lender.
Basketball is here at Fresno City College. Come cheer on the Rams, both men's and women's teams, two of the top programs in the state, where every game is fast, fierce, and full of heart. Don't miss your chance to see championship-level basketball live at FCC. Want to know where the Rams play next, or check schedules for other sports? Visit FCCRams.com for full fall and winter athletic schedules. Be part of the tradition. Be part of pride. Fresno City College Athletics, where champions compete and fans bring the energy.
KFC's got your back this Thanksgiving with their Cajun deep-fried turkey. Fully cooked and Cajun seasoned, it's ready to reheat at home. More time for family, football, and fun. Pre-order a week in advance at a participating KFC and pick it up in person. Enjoy it a la carte or as part of a family meal or feast with sides like mashed potatoes, gravy, and warm biscuits. Make Thanksgiving extra tasty with KFC's Cajun turkey. Happy Thanksgiving from your locally owned KFC.
Hi, buddy. Welcome back to 52. About 3 or 4 minutes ago in the show, handed off the Phillies Fine Show behind the bench. Normally 3 to 6, Monday through Friday. On Mondays at this time of the year, because of Monday Night Football, he has 2 hours for you. Then he will hand it off to Carter and the gang at Me and Ed's Victory Grill. Stop on in, see them, Cedar and Dakota Granite Park. Terrific food at Me and Ed's. Great big screen TVs there, giveaways, and a lot of fun. And we have the Westwood One broadcast for you. The Eagles and the Chargers, very important game tonight. So stay tuned for Phil. You can also give Phil a call on the Lee's Air hotline, 559-320-1430. I want to remind you about the upcoming schedule here for both 1430 and 790. That's brought to you by our friend Ed Dunkel and his fine business, Precision Civil Engineering, planning, land surveying, civil engineering, landscape architecture, construction management. It's all there under one roof, 449-4500 or precisioneng.net. For more information, Ed has been a benefactor at Fresno State for a good long while now, proud graduate of the Lyles College of Engineering on campus. A lot of those grads head to work for Ed at Precision. Again, the goal to unify athletics and academics to provide more funding resources to students. It's worked beautifully as Ed has gone through the program there, and then with his great success with Precision Civil Engineering, been able to benefit his alma mater, and we thank him for everything he does for Fresno State. As far as the lineup goes, I mentioned the game tonight. The Sharks tomorrow. The Lakers are in the midst of the Emirates Cup, and they'll have games this week as well. And then for us, we segue Thursday into the home stretch now in the National Football League, as Thursday night will mean that everybody is back to action. All the bye weeks are done. The 49ers have finished up their bye week now. So 4 weeks to go. It's going to be a sprint to the finish. And for the 49ers, they've got a home game against Tennessee. They're on the road at Indy, and again, the Colts are really taking on water big time, and now Jones with the Achilles means the 49ers going with a great chance to win. They also have the Bears and the Seahawks at home. They have a great shot to make the playoffs. The Rams righted the ship yesterday. They're going to get in. It may very well be that the Seahawks, Rams, and 49ers will all get in the playoffs. We'll have all the 49er, Ram, and Raider games for you, and then everything else through Westwood One right through the Super Bowl. So stay tuned for that. We have the Thursday night, Sunday night, and, of course, Monday night games the rest of the way. Also remind you everything for the station, 1430 ESPNFresno.com. You find the live links and podcasts there. We are with you at 2 o'clock each and every weekday. You can reach me, TDAD1, at att.net, TDAD, the number 1 at att.net. First names are fine. For Phil, normally 3 to 6 Monday through Friday. You can always reach him on that Leaves Our hotline, 559-320-1430. Also, stop by and see him in person on Thursdays at Fashion Furniture with our good buddy Rod Avedikian. Their sales are still going on there. El Paso, across from River Park. Best furniture you can find anywhere. Nothing like it in all of California. Tremendous conversation of Phil's show and also some goodies as well. So stop by and see him at Fashion Furniture on Thursdays. Paul Metters has 2 outstanding shows with us on Wednesdays on our sister station, the Deuce 790, Sunbird Sports Show, all about Fresno Pacific Athletics. And then Saturday morning, the long-running show live from First String Sports on 1430, Central Valley Sports Report, 10 a.m. to noon. Also want to remind you that as we roll through the NFL and the NBA, Major League Baseball coming up around the bend before you know it. Congratulations to Jeff Kent for ending up in the Hall of Fame. Jeff, a very interesting guy in a variety of fronts, but a very talented player. And so he ends up in the Hall. And for Bonds and Clemens, it's probably going to be never that they're going to end up unless you have a complete change in the attitude at Major League Baseball. But that is something that we'll discuss at some point in the future. All right, guys, want to thank the sponsors one more time. Our friends at KFC, thanks again to the local operators in Fresno, Clovis, Selma, and Kerman. I want to remind you again, the holidays are